mass media.
Attacking the podcast world. And based on the true legendary cult classic, Olus Media presents
Attack of the Killer Tomatoes.
Did somebody mention biscuits?
Attack of the Killer Tomatoes. They'll beat you, mash you, squish you, mash you, chew you up or run.
How bad is it?
Finish you off.
Also, I definitely don't get to fly again.
I'm not talking like that, you wiener! What about the tomatoes?
You're listening to the Attack of the Killer Tomatoes podcast. This week, our fearless host Costa takes a bite out of Comic-Con LA. He and Michael Polis joined a live panel discussion led by $2 late fee legend Zak Shaffer. Envision a toy maker, wrestler, and podcaster walking into an exhibit hall. They all catch up on the saucy secrets behind the Killer Tomatoes franchise. From slicing into marketing tactics to peeling back the rise of VHS and merch, this episode is packed with tomato-tastic fun. Let's dive into this juicy cultivated panel discussion already in progress.
Attack of the Killer Tomatoes. You've never seen anything like it.
And you've never seen anything like this panel. Yeah, and give yourselves a big round of applause. Come on. All right. Let me just pull this up right now. Thank you, everybody, for joining us for the Attack of the Killer Tomatoes celebration of cult cinema panel here at LA Comic-Con. I want to introduce the whole panel before we get into the whole nitty-gritty good stuff of this panel. First, I'm going to start at the far end. He's a brother of mine. He is my co-host on the wrestling podcast Territory Marks. He is a wrestler and an actor. Paul London, everybody. Paul London. Another podcast brother of mine, Max Boyle from Ready to Retro. All right, give it up for Max Boyle. And now, the creator of Attack of the Killer Tomatoes, Costa Dillon. Big round of applause for Costa. And Michael Polis, who owns Atomic Toy Box Studios, correct? All right, I got that all out correctly. And he's got a lot of fun surprises to talk about in regards to Attack of the Killer Tomatoes. Michael Polis, everybody. Gentlemen, thank you so much for doing this. Oh, I'm Zak Shaffer. I run $2 late fee, Podcasting After Dark, 80s Kids Unite, Territory Marks. I think that's all the podcasts I do, a lot of them. And thanks again to Olus Media, who has provided all the audio setup for us, too, to do this awesome podcast and panel. Okay, so Costa, you're like the big deal here, right? Really are.
Thanks.
You are, yes. You're the creator of this franchise, this amazing franchise that these Killer Tomatoes. For those that don't know, can you give like a brief synopsis of how all this came to be?
Contrary to the posters and things, it's not a horror documentary. It says it's a horror comedy musical. It's actually a documentary, and
it's true.
Many people get that wrong. When the film was first made, people weren't yet afraid of GMO foods and frankenfoods and stuff. So we felt we needed to warn the world that you do need to be afraid of your vegetables. The whole point of eating your vegetables is to eat them before they eat you. Moms leave that second part off because it scares kids and they won't go to bed. So that's how it came about.
It's amazing. And over 30 years ago, and what's crazy to me too is that, did you expect this film to have the legs it had?
No, it's made me, hundreds of dollars, I think. I didn't. I expected to be a thousandaire, but it didn't quite make it that far. I don't know when we made it. But no, I never expected anybody would even know what it was a year later. Never mind 40 years later or whatever it is. No.
It's pretty phenomenal. I mean, and sincerely, from the 70s and then into the 80s, I'm going to show a trailer for Return of the Killer Tomatoes in just a moment to remind people of some of the star-studded celebrities that showed up in that film. But I'm really fascinated by the fact that there's a toy line, there's a video game, there's all these things from a movie that could have been forgotten, but it hasn't been.
There's a lunchbox.
A lunchbox! Holy cow! That was not scripted. That was not planned at all.
And a Game Boy.
Yes.
A lot of goodies in here.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
All kinds of stuff.
Yeah, so.
Also some really cool beach blankets, but they're too big to bring.
Oh, well, you know, we can, when LA Comic-Con goes to Santa Monica, we can redo that. Michael, and you're holding up a bib?
This is the apron, in case you're at the Killer Tomatoes Cafe, which actually was a real cafe.
Was
at
it?
one point.
I don't remember that.
There was
only open for a day.
It was a pop-up.
In San Diego.
In San Diego.
San Diego Comic-Con. But we actually made Killer Tomato Cafe aprons.
Amazing. So, Michael, what was your...
What am I doing here?
Yeah, what are you doing here? How did you get connected to the Attack of the Killer Tomatoes?
So, I was brought on to help produce new content as well as to make stuff with regard to Attack of the Killer Tomatoes. And that relationship started about 12 years ago-ish, even longer than that. What am I saying? Probably like 2008, 2009. So, we've been working on new products as well as kind of working on a new iteration, but we'll let Costa talk more about that.
Yeah, we'll get into that in just a moment. Paul, do you remember the first time you saw tomatoes as being something other than something you put on a pizza or on a sandwich?
I mean, it would have been ketchup, right? Like,
Yes,
I mean, that would
and
have
ketchup
been,
too, of course.
Yeah. I mean, I was curious. I mean, I do remember my early McDonald's days when they had a soul. Did they ever have a soul? Roy Kroc. I was curious when. Do you remember the moment? Because I imagine you made this, or this started to grow, pun intended. And was there a phone call? Was there somewhere where you thought, like, God, this thing's got vines? Like, it's really, it's got legs.
I got work.
Okay, cool. But you know, where really surprised you?
Yes, we made this film. I was 23 years old. My partners are 23 years old. Basically, because when you're 23 years old, you feel like you can do anything unless somebody tells you you can't. And so we made a movie, which is well known, cost less than $100,000. Then we tried to get theaters to show it, which they did. That's
awesome.
And still had drive-ins in those days. And that kind of would have been it, except for the invention of these things.
Yeah.
Who's familiar with a VHS tape in this audience? Yeah. I think this is the right audience for Attack of the Killer Tomatoes.
Yeah, some of you look like you might be almost as old as me.
Wow.
When videotapes, those of you of the younger persuasion, when videotapes first came out, home video machines, the studios did not want to make their movies available on video. They were afraid it would hurt their box office market and their ability to sell the films to television. And so they refused to license their films. When we were approached, we said, heck yes.
Right.
And in those days, video stores were still kind of rare. There actually were in malls and things. And I think we were one of the first 100 titles available. And they cost like $120 because they never thought anybody would want to buy a videotape. So they were priced for renting.
Yeah.
And when people went to a video store and there wasn't a whole lot to choose from yet, there's one of the things you could choose from. So it started to gain a second life because the people were looking for something they could rent, and they could rent Attack of the Killer Tomatoes, which Variety called one of the 10 best titles of movies of all time. So I should have made a 10 best movie to go with the title, but the title worked. And then the Fox Children's Network did a show called Muppet Babies, and they used a clip from the film for a dream sequence with Elmo was in it. And it turned out to be a really popular episode of Muppet Babies. So we got approached to do a second film, Return of the Killer Tomatoes, which we had already done another movie called Happy Hour with Rich Little and Jamie Farr, Tawny Katane, also not well known. And we weren't interested in doing any more Killer Tomato movies. We figured it was a one-off. And this was New World Pictures approached us. And then they used the magic words, "We'll pay you." And so we said, okay, we'll do a second movie. We'll do another Killer Tomato movie. And then we did a third one and a fourth one, because once Fox had it, Fox did a cartoon show on the Fox Children's Network. It was the first cartoon show out of that network. And then we did a third and fourth film for 20th Century Fox. So it kind of grew out of those origins. If it weren't for videotapes and probably Muppet Babies, it probably would have died with a single film and would have been some obscure thing that you rarely hear of.
Wow. I mean, so Jim Henson and somebody trying to revamp the film market, it's combined, I guess, so to speak.
That's it.
Max, was your first connection to Attack the Killer Tomatoes the cartoon or the video game?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I was born in 1990, so I was in that, sweet spot. So, especially late 80s, early 90s, there was always those three things that were marketed to every kid. It was cartoons, toys, and video games, and this franchise had it all.
Yeah.
So, and the cartoon was so weird. It was so different and
ahead of its time, I think.
Way ahead of its time.
Anybody out here, have you ever seen the cartoon? Raise your hand if you've seen the cartoon. All right, we'll play a clip in a moment.
Yeah. So, kind of scary too, with like the tomatoes with the sharp teeth and things like that. So it was awesome. It was a great time to be a kid.
It was terrifying. I actually am going to show a clip of just the opening bumper to the show and I want to show a trailer for the Return of the Killer Tomatoes, because I think that is worth revisiting as well. It was on Fox Kids.
Welcome to the Fun Zone.
Now Saturday morning on Fox starts with a Slice 'em and Dice 'em Attack of the Killer Tomatoes.
And that's no more.
Meet the fresh crop of villainous veggies.
Sounds good already.
Like tomato, ketchup,
Zoltan.
I'm going to make a pizza out of you!
Catch the hottest action around, or else
We tomatoize them.
start your Saturday morning adventure with Attack of the Killer Tomatoes on Fox.
So you obviously heard the voice of John Astin, who did Dr. Gangreen, and John Astin, I think, is a very well-known actor. And can you talk a little bit about how he got connected with?
Well, we auditioned him.
Okay.
We also auditioned Danny DeVito and Sting, believe it or not.
Not the wrestler Sting. No? Okay. Just want to make sure we have a wrestling podcast.
They read for Gangreen, and we hired John because he seemed right for the part. Danny DeVito wasn't as famous yet. Sting was a singer or something. And John Astin turned out to be great. I mean, he made the part his. I talk to him every couple of weeks. He's like 94 years old now, and he's still sharp as ever and smart as ever. He's a funny guy. But he made the part his own. He did a great job. I think I asked him on the podcast. You can listen to my podcast at killertomatoes.com, plug number 1. I asked him why he did it. And he said, did his agent suggest he do it? And he said, no, my agent told me not to do it. But he liked it. And he thought it was fun, so he did it. And whenever I talk to him, he always talks about what a great time he had. Because it was in 3 of the films plus the cartoon show.
Yeah, the cartoon, like, furthered the character development. If you haven't seen it, it's worth checking out. The quality is not good because it's on YouTube. And has there ever been a discussion about trying to get that out for a wider audience?
We don't have the rights to that, so it's owned by Fox.
Yeah, we've tried that.
Disney now?
Yeah,
Well, no, it was on, Disney now, but it was by Marvel, it's a different Marvel Studios than the Marvel Studios that makes the films now.
Right.
This Marvel went defunct, and so I have no idea where the rights went,
Yeah,
These things are so confusing.
We're in the middle of, trying to have those discussions about pulling those assets back.
Okay.
So,
Fingers crossed. Yeah.
It's when one company absorbs another company and they let a lot of people go, it's hard to find who the right people are sometimes. But we're digging. We've been digging for a little while now.
Well, speaking of maintaining the property, digging, and growing the property, you are in the process, and you brought something with you to share. Yes. Growing the franchise. Yeah. Where is it going? Like, what are the next kind of plans, stages with it?
So we did a little experiment at San Diego Comic-Con. I wasn't quite sure which was. You brought fabulously these wonderful
the original toys from the 90s. Yeah.
So I tried to make some figures for San Diego to see how they would do. We did the OG tomato, which is kind of the one from the cover, and then a second one called Red Fool, which was Deadpool kind of makeup. So this one is, and I'm hoping we have an image of it. This one's coming out for New York Comic Con, which is the Tomato Terror. The mask actually comes off.
Oh, awesome.
So you can see underneath. In fact, Toy Tokyo, which is a really wonderful, big, in the collector space, is going to launch these for us. They'll all be, we've got spaces for autographs on the back. But we're going to do this at Toy Tokyo at New York Comic Con, and I'm reserving some on atomic-nerd.com. So we'll have a few of those. And in fact, I haven't told Lev at Toy Tokyo this yet, but I'm going to differentiate them. I think the ones on the website, I'm going to put blood spatter, or tomato juice spatter, I should say, on the mask. So they'll be super cool.
Very cool. Wow. So, and I just had to say, too, quickly, in regards to the cartoon, Tom Bray, I believe, voiced the Wilbur Finletter. If you don't know who Tom Bray is, for all you 80s television fans, he was on a show called Riptide. He was the nerdy guy on Riptide. He was also in Prince of Darkness as well, and does a wonderful version of Wilbur Finletter. But that toy is so cool.
Yeah, no, we're psyched. In fact, keep an eye out for another version coming out at DesignerCon in November. So we're kind of continuing to perpetuate. We've done even more stuff we can talk about after too.
Yeah. So and what I love on the back of this box is Dr. Gangreen in the middle, because he's such a huge integral part of the story. Originally, in the original 1978 film, right? That Dr. Gangreen was not even like thought of yet. So
no, it was a new character for the second film, right? And which is spelled Green, and Fox kept getting it wrong because they didn't understand it was a pun. Was it not gangrene the disease? That didn't matter, right?
Well, I think it's only festered and gotten bigger as the years have gone on.
Hey, this is a great place to take a break. We'll be back with more of the show right after this. Like we talk about in the show, there are a lot that goes into a successful podcast, more than just pushing record. Whether you're new or seasoned, if you're looking for someone to make your great show idea a reality, then we've got your back. Check us out at oldsmedia.com and see how we can help you push record on your next big project. The Dear San Diego podcast is produced in collaboration with The Times of San Diego. Repeatedly recognized by the San Diego Press Club, The Times of San Diego delivers timely and transparent news to, for, and about America's finest city. To learn more on how you can support this trusted resource of information, visit timesofsandiego.com.
Here's a cautionary tale. She who climbs the 20-foot high diving board should be prepared mentally for what it looks like at first glance down. We all should have some idea of what it takes to plunge from new heights, unless you have someone who's willing to push you, and that can be dangerous. Join me on my podcast, From the Nest, where you can learn from other philanthropists' journeys through the world of fundraising before, during, or after you jump into the pool. That's the From the Nest podcast with Charity Jen. Follow and subscribe at olsmedia.com or wherever you get your podcasts.
Hey, we're joining the regular scheduled program already in progress.
I love the fact that you are incorporating what looks like a Jason Voorhees mask, and the Deadpool as well. Is there an idea to do more kind of spin-off inspired?
Well, we're legally not allowed to say the.
Sorry.
No, I'm kidding.
Sorry. Inspired by pro hockey player, Jason Voorhees for the Calgary Flames, I believe.
I believe you're correct, sir. We're looking at doing sort of crossover parody, kind of having some fun with the characters. We're debating a plain face, meaning it's just a tomato. We have some glow in the dark that we're playing around with, and there's also one that we're talking about for exhibit at Designer Con, which is be about yay big, about 12-inch tall. And I'm blanking on his name now, the eye patch.
Zoltan?
Zoltan.
Yeah.
So it'll be Zoltan at San Diego. We're going to have a big old prop version of him.
Very cool. Very cool.
And that'll go on sale next year.
Awesome. And by the way, for those of you in the audience, we might have some giveaways at the end, so you might want to stick around to the end of the panel, just letting you know, keep you in your seats.
Yeah, they lost, those two people.
Yeah, they had two people lost, unfortunately.
And they have to be plastic because, unlike a more famous toy, Mr. Tomato Head didn't work. I mean, once you punch a hole in it, you've had it, you know. They just don't hold up.
Did you find that was Return of the Killer Tomatoes an even wackier experience to go, like even more wild?
No, it wasn't. No, well, the first film was just, like I said, three 23-year-olds trying to figure out how to make a movie.
Right.
It was a lot of run and gun. The skin of our teeth. We usually didn't even have a permit to film. We just put up a camera and film.
Wow. Can't do that nowadays.
Yeah, I know. Well, you absolutely cannot. So the second film was much more professional. You know, it was financed by New World Pictures, and we had people who were professional crew and that sort of thing. So it was a whole different experience. Plus, we knew a lot more about filmmaking, 10 years later. And this was an era when you made film. Now, of course, you don't make film, it's digital. But this was actual film. But for the first movie, when you make film...
Okay, you young people in the audience, film is a cellulite-type material that you run through a camera, and you had to send it to a developer, and they had to process it, and it came back, and it was a negative, then you had to process it to meet what's called an answer print, which is a positive, and then you would cut that and add in the editor, and then they would go back to the negative and cut the negative and paste it together, and that would be made into positive film to send to the theater. That's an expensive and time-consuming process.
Right.
Half the cost of the first movie was the film.
Wow.
And the film processing. And today, you don't have that.
No.
Digital film is the cheapest part of making a movie. People make movies on iPhones.
Right.
So it's gone from being the most expensive part of low-budget filmmaking to the cheapest part of low-budget filmmaking, to the point where it's not even an issue anymore.
Yeah. It reminds me a little bit, Attack of the Killer Tomatoes, the first one, versus Return, reminds me a bit of Phantasm from 1978 as well, and then Phantasm 2, which got this big budget, and suddenly it's like, oh, we can make a movie now, right? I want to show everybody the trailer for Return of the Killer Tomatoes, and we'll talk a little bit about that as well. And keep an eye out for a cameo.
And years ago, a motion picture became the most notorious cult movie of all time. Predictably, the French called it a masterpiece. The name of this legend of cinema.
The Attack of the Killer Tomatoes.
It was so stupid, so cheap, such a piece of steaming dog flop. You think it would have attracted horseflies. Never an audience. Now, get ready to sit on your intelligence once again. They made the sequel, The Return of the Killer Tomatoes. Guess what? It's a lot better. It had to be. As you remember, 10 years ago, mankind was threatened with the greatest red menace of all. Angry, merciless, killer tomatoes. We were only saved thanks to the heroism of a brave handful of untalented actors.
Are you Rob Lowe?
No, they're back.
This time, we shall not fail!
A mad scientist.
My tomatoes can be made to resemble anyone.
Together with a yuppie pervert, turn embittered, mean-spirited tomatoes into an army of psychotic, neo-Nazi plant life. And let's not forget the stunning hell-spawned creation who just might put out for the entire planet.
Do you want to make love?
I want.
I also cook 815 international dishes and use all the popular home appliances.
You'll see atrocities beyond belief.
You can't see your feet. Do the words fat cow mean anything to you?
You'll see how producers extracted special favors from certain well-endowed performers. It's got more laughs than out of Africa. It's gayer than Kiss of the Spider-Woman.
The girl of my dreams is a vegetable. You wouldn't believe what she can do with 6 milk bottles and a tuning fork.
The return of the killer tomatoes.
It's definitely a learning experience.
That was George Clooney in a smaller role. That film actually got a Blu-ray release on Arrow, right? Beautiful.
It has a Blu-ray release, right?
Yeah, so...
Yeah, I mean, all of these things.
It's got it all. The ultimate pitchman right here.
Yeah, you can't, let me get my props here. Yeah, they're all available on this old format called DVD. Or you can get them pirated online, you know, and which I don't make any money to make that.
Do you make money on...
You can still buy these toys on eBay for like $200 or something.
And you still have it in the box.
Ridiculous amount of
wow. Yeah. Okay, amazing.
It's a ridiculous amount of money. And there's even, for some reason, I don't remember why, Disney had us make this director's edition, which we shot extra stuff, just baloney stuff, saying, you know, this was left out of the original on the cutting room floor, but it's not, it's stuff we've shot new. But I don't remember why they did it, it came with a tomato seed packet.
Wait, so you shot footage?
We shot extra footage, and then the joke was it was lost, you know, as director's cut, but it was never in the original thing in the first place. You know? And then one of the scenes is in some foreign language because we said we couldn't find the original piece. So, but it's actually a pretty good film. This is really hard to find because it's never been out on DVD.
Well, I think one of the beautiful things about your franchise is how smart, like how kind of tongue-in-cheek and ahead of its time it was, especially the cartoon.
It's true, I am really smart.
You are, yes. That's why we have you here.
Was it always tomatoes?
Yeah,
was it because it's like cheap and it's easy to get? And...
yes, it was always tomatoes. I wish it wasn't, because if celery would have been easier to work with. It was really hard to make 6-foot tomatoes. But that's what it always was from the beginning.
Wow.
Michael, what does this franchise mean to you? I mean, obviously you're making toys off of it now, but
you know, it's definitely weird. It's definitely, but fun. It's different than anything that I've ever worked on. So I've worked on some stuff, you know, weird things from...
Well, tell people what you've worked on.
So I was at Universal Studios. I worked on stuff like Land Before Time, Babe. Then I worked at Muppets for years. Worked on Mirror Masks, like Neil Gaiman's first movie. And then I worked on Yo Gabba Gabba. So like preschool, I produced that.
There's a party in my tummy.
There's a party. It's so yummy, yeah. And but this was just kind of like fun and quirky and weird, and I think that I don't know. I was a little bit young when it came out to go see it in theater, but I did end up seeing it on probably this format,
VHS, yes.
And it stuck with me. And the thing that's most endearing to me is it is the movie that everybody knows the title to. Almost everybody's heard the song, but very few people have actually seen,
Yeah.
which is kind of funny.
Yeah. Yeah, unlike, something, I don't know, when you think of cult films like Toxic Avenger or, Basket Case, you said, for one, or The Room, I think, is a very popular cult film now. But Attack of the Killer Tomatoes, you should see it, first of all, but you don't need to see it to know immediately what the concept is all about, right? I have to ask you, Costa, in the cartoon version of Attack of the Killer Tomatoes, there's a reoccurring character that pops up and he just shouts, "Tomatoes!" Was that, are you familiar with that character?
Yeah, it's patterned after the guy in the library.
Yeah, okay.
From the first film. Which
Yeah.
is me.
Okay,
Right.
yes. I love that.
But I didn't get to do anything for the cartoon show. That wasn't me in the cartoon show.
Okay, so we're not going to talk about the cartoon anymore. But Max, you would, now Costa brought out, I believe there's a Game Boy in that lunchbox.
Yes.
Did you play the video game?
I played the NES one.
Okay.
So, has anybody played the NES game of... No?
Attack
Nobody?
of the Killer Tomatoes?
No? Nobody? All right. The game is 15 minutes long. There's 5 stages, and it's basically you're just jumping up and down, and you're squishing tomatoes, and it's pretty much it. But it's memorable. If you want to impress somebody, just put on the NES game and beat it in 15 minutes. So.
Well, and then the Sega game is connected to the cartoon. I mean, they're both connected to the cartoon, which is so great about it. But
and then the Game Boy one's a little different, though.
Yes.
Yeah. You had the Game Boy one,
I had
right?
the Game Boy, still have the Game Boy version, and you could save on that, I believe. I'm trying to recall, but it had excerpt from the cartoon. It felt very connected to it. So, Michael, did you ever play the Game Boy game or the Nintendo game?
I did not play the Game Boy game. However, one of the things that we're working on is a board game.
Oh.
So we ended up showing game pieces at San Diego Comic-Con, and I apologize for not bringing images of those.
Yeah.
But the idea is it's a modular game system where you can buy the Attack of the Killer Tomatoes game, and you're basically playing tomatoes against the military.
That's awesome.
And then, but you can buy a module for Mars Attacks. So you could have the Martians fighting tomatoes, or you could have, we have a Garbage Pail Kids license, so we could do Garbage Pail Kids versus tomatoes versus Martians. We have a Captain Action license, so we could do that. So it's kind of this cool thing. We're going to launch initially with Mars Attacks in February,
So
and
you
then
have-
tomatoes will come after that.
So you have the Mars Attacks license as well.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe Rocketeer, is that?
And the Rocketeer, yes.
Okay.
Yes. So and the idea was it's like a fun, casual game, and you won't have to spend 20 hours in your dining room table filled with stuff getting yelled at. But you could play it in 30, 40 minutes. And the cool part is that the board itself is modular. So it's almost like a deck of cards that you lay out for each game. So there are millions of different iterations.
Yeah.
But it's super fun. It's been game tested for about a year now.
Okay. Awesome.
And we've been getting really great reviews. In fact, I'll say the buddy of mine who worked with this guy, Gary Gygax, who created Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah.
He is one of the guys who helped game test it. So
Very cool.
Yeah, gave it a thumbs up.
So that's another exclusive for us.
Yeah.
Awesome. Outside of San Diego Comic-Con.
Yeah. Well, I just put them out. I didn't really tell anyone what it was, just to see if people would be interested, and they were all like, where can I buy those? So the idea is if you want to just collect the figures themselves, it's a tomato about the size of a golf ball on a tomato can rather.
Okay. Yep.
So you could just collect them, or you can play.
Wow, that sounds great. I mean, so Costa, did you envision that Mars Attacks would be connected to Attack of the Killer Tomatoes?
Yeah, Tim Burton stole our ending.
He did.
Please tell us.
The ending, if you haven't seen Attack of the Killer Tomatoes,
I think there's two people that might
not. At the end, we played Puberty Love, which was really, it's supposed to be a horrendous version of a Donny Osmond song, which is
redundant. And,
Donny Osmond sang a song called
No,
Puberty
it's supposed
Love.
to be a spoof of Donny Osmond.
Oh, Puppy Love, yes.
Yeah. And it makes the tomatoes shrink and they stomp on them. So while watching Mars Attacks, and what happens at the end, they play a really bad song, and
it's true.
And the Martians explode. It's like, hey, wait a minute. You know?
It's true.
Yeah, where Tim Burton got that idea, you know? And if you haven't heard Puberty Love, it is a bad song.
Well, it's funny you say that.
It's supposed to be a bad song.
Because
Are you going to play Puberty Love?
I am going to play Puberty Love.
Oh, please.
Cover your ears.
Yeah, be careful.
Everybody, cover your ears.
Turn on the record player! Cover your ears, everyone!
It's amazing how you were able to shoot that scene and make those tomatoes look so tiny.
Those are 6-foot tomatoes. In their final appearance, they broke during the scene.
Did you write Puberty Love?
I wrote Puberty Love. I didn't write I wrote the lyrics.
Okay.
The composer of the film, a man named Gordon Goodwin, he was at this time a student at Cal State Northridge. And since that time, he's had a career in film. He won a Grammy Award for arranging the soundtrack to The Incredibles. He won another Grammy Award for, I can't remember what else. He won a couple of Emmy Awards. So he's had a really successful career, and we got him as a college student. The singer in Puberty Love is Fu Cameron, who is the drummer for Soundgarden and Pearl Jam.
Oh, wow.
And the guy that did the explosions for that battle scene did the explosions for Star Wars. He came straight from Star Wars to our film. So, you know, there's a lot of people that, a lot more successful than me, came out of Killer Tomatoes.
Well, you know, Roger Corman helped discover, you know, Jim Cameron, and
lots of people, right?
So you can take credit for discovering these people. I want to make sure we have questions from the audience. If anybody has questions, we've got about 10 more minutes before we wrap up. And we have a little fun trivia contest for those, and we might have some prizes. So you have a book there on the table here, the novelization.
2 different versions.
Yes.
There's 2 different versions.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Trade paperback and mass market paperback.
And this one's autographed.
Autographed. Who autographed it?
I don't know.
I did.
Oh. So Costa, are we going to see another Attack of the Killer Tomatoes movie?
We are working towards that end. We're in negotiations now, and with any luck, we hope we can have an announcement by the end of the year.
Wow.
Again, exclusive. You're only getting exclusives here at LA Comic-Con with our panel. Any chance you'll cast Paul as a wrestler in the?
You never can tell.
I'm more of a mustard guy, I must admit. Seriously, I really prefer it.
Paul, we were talking a little bit about, before we came up here, you were talking a little bit about Return of the Killer Tomatoes. There was an actor that stood out to you, and you're like, oh, this guy was uncredited as.
Yeah, Dana Ashbrook.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, well, yeah.
I was
Ashbrook
like, that's awesome.
Yeah, and what was he in?
Well, I remember him from Waxworks. That was like where I first saw him. But he was in Twin Peaks as well.
Twin Peaks. He was in Twin Peaks. Yes, he was uncredited in our film because he was a cousin of one of the people who makes the film. So yeah.
Yeah, I thought that was really cool.
And Return of the Living Dead Part 2.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. I'm just going to put that out there. Yeah. Okay, so does anybody have any questions before we...
Well, I just want to say this novelization was written 2 years ago by Jeff Strand, so it is still, things are still alive. And you can buy this, look for it online. It's sold at Amazon, but he novelized the story. And just another example of something that doesn't die. This guy
that's a relic
just approached us, and he's put out Killer Tomato perfume. What? And I gotta tell you,
wow,
it smells like tomatoes in a garden. It does not smell like you want to smell. If you have, I mean, if that's the smell you're going for, it's it. I mean, it's really amazing how they captured it, but I don't know who would want to wear it.
That is
so
amazing.
If you want to try it before you leave today, I'll let you try it, but it'll take 3 days to wash off. So I'm just gonna warn you. You know.
Do we have any volunteers?
It's a heck of a
who wants to volunteer?
an aroma.
Did you ever get any hate letters from Heinz or cease like threatening letters
We
from
almost made a
Heinz?
deal with Heinz.
Okay, even better.
Can I see
But
that
we
box?
haven't. It's hard to get a company that makes a tomato product want something that's called killer. They want their food product, you know.
That's a great question, but I also have to point out this is a big box. And for those of you that are not familiar with the VHS collectors of yore, this is a clamshell big box. This is amazing. The quality of this.
The presentation. It's a nice presentation.
They also made a candle.
Does it smell like a pizza?
Yeah, I have no. It doesn't. It smells like
Earthy
gardening,
tomato.
earthy. It's very earthy, smelly.
So you want to smell like dirt?
Yeah, it smells like dirt.
I mean, Attack of the Killer Tomatoes needs a tomato worm. Well, they did do tomato worms on the cartoon in Africa. Okay, so we have about 10 more minutes. We're starting to wrap up. Does anybody have any questions before? Oh, yes, please, in the audience.
One of my favorite parts in Return of the Killer Tomatoes that always cracked me up when I first saw the film in middle school was the super obvious product placement that like stops the film for I think it's like Pepsi or whatever. Can you talk a little bit about that? Was that always
Sure.
supposed to be like a full parody or like was it for like budget purposes? Like,
Well, the Return of the Killer Tomato, each Killer Tomato movie is about something else. The first film is about spoofing bad, cheap horror films, and the second one's about filmmaking and sequels and so forth. The third one is about detective shows, and the fourth one is about Americans' really bad perspective of the rest of the world. Killer Tomatoes Eat France, which is the best film, by the way. It stars Mark Price who played Skippy on Family Ties. And Miss Universe, who at that time, Angela Visser, who fell asleep on my shoulder on the plane on the way to Paris, and I didn't move for 2 hours because Miss Universe was sleeping on my shoulder. So the joke was product placement was so obvious then. I mean, Superman 2 is the one I got it from because it's so obvious in Superman 2. But nobody would pay us because we weren't, famous enough, but they gave us the stuff. So we got cases of Moosehead beer and cases of Nestle's Crunch and so forth, which they had to stop the crew and the actors from eating before the film was over because we needed them as props. And in that scene we stopped the film and George Clooney and I have a conversation about product placement. And if you watch the film carefully, everything up to that point, all the products in it are generic, and they're all generic products. And after that, everything is a brand product after that. It's just sometimes, and we weren't making a film for TV. You didn't do that in those days. You made films for big screens. And for TV now, you have to show close-ups so that you won't miss something. But because you see it on a small screen, you don't see those nuances. But yeah, that was the whole joke.
Middle school, you saw that in middle school. Yeah. That's awesome. So, and does anybody else have any questions? Yes, we'll do in the front and then in the back. Go ahead.
When you thought originally, was it a group of friends? How old are you guys? How did you get the funding? I mean,
there are three of us that formed this company, and we started making films in high school, just Super 8 movies, and we would show them at high school auditoriums were $1 or whatever. And we entered one and won third place in the National Kodak Teenage Film Festival, which doesn't exist anymore. And so we then started our own film company. And again, things are so different back in the 70s. We used to film high school and college football games. And we bought our own film processor and processed the film and delivered the film to coaches the next day. So we had a functioning film studio, so to speak. When we decided to try and make a feature film, we knew filmmaking A to Z. We literally shot it and processed it ourselves. So we knew how to make film. But we had, I don't have formal training in filmmaking. I didn't go to film school.
But we were making these amateur films, and I just got the idea of as something, an absurd take on bad horror films, especially bad Japanese horror films at the time. And Killer Tomatoes was like the first thing that popped in my head because it just seemed ridiculous. And I brought it to the other guys and said, "What do you think?" And they all said, "Yeah, because it's original." And so we went with it.
It's awesome. So you think about it, like you wouldn't have Airplane, you wouldn't have Sharknado, right. You wouldn't have. There are all these films that would not exist if it wasn't for you.
Snakes on a Plane.
Yeah, I mean,
Troll 2.
When we were doing,
sure.
When we were doing, we processed the sound at Glen Sound, which also doesn't exist anymore, a big sound house in LA, and you had these piles of boxes from the tapes, the reel-to-reel tapes that you use to record sound in movies. And they all, on the side of the box, said Attack of the Killer Tornadoes, because it was clear that somebody who worked at the studio, the sound department, figured that can't be tomatoes, it must be wrong.
Yeah.
And
they made a mistake.
And changed it all to tornadoes.
Got time for one more question. Right? Yeah, right there.
I've got a question. So it's two-parter. Number one, there's a film website called Rotten Tomatoes. Any relation, number one. Number two, I've always been fascinated with cult films and why something becomes a cult film. And you've mentioned a couple other Snakes on a Plane, and someone mentioned Cocaine Bear. Those are all movies that try to be a cult film.
Yeah.
And you can't try to be a real cult film. The ones you mentioned are Toxic Avenger is a great example. Yep. The Room, Rocky Horror Picture Show. These are that kind of naturally became.
Yeah.
And this is something as a film student, I've always been really enamored with. So why Attack of the Killer Tomatoes? I mean, is it because it was one of 100? I mean, that may be it, but is there any other reason you could think why it was caught on?
Well, the first part of your question, Rotten Tomatoes, yeah, we have considered suing them because, our tomatoes are red and their tomatoes are red, and there's,
pretty close.
Their tomatoes squish, our tomatoes squish. Yep. There's a lot of similarities there, but no, we don't. We're not connected. I think if you try to intentionally make a cult film, you'll fail. Because it's like you're trying too hard. The audience decides what's a cult film, not the people who make it. And when we made this first film, there really wasn't any such thing as a cult film yet. Rocky Horror was not a thing yet. And Little Shop of Horrors kind of was the original movie, the non-musical movie, kind of was, and a few other things from the 50s. But because these didn't exist, the only place you saw movies was if your TV station decided to put it on, or if you had a revival house theater around you, which they're almost all gone now.
Or at midnight.
So it was, well, right, that's the midnight showing. So it was hard to have a market for something called a cult film because there was no place to see them. And they really became a thing when you could see it at home. But yeah, certainly we did not intend to make a cult movie. We intended to be thousandaires.
Well, you brought up a really good point. I think this connects with it. The inception of VHS and video stores and word of mouth and collecting and, well, you got to go check out this movie. I made a bootleg of it. Next thing you know, it gets passed on. And prior to Killer Tomatoes, we didn't have that. And now everything's streaming, everything's digital, everything's accessible. The 80s and 90s, that's where the cult movies, I think, really took place. 70s as well, the inception of VHS stores, video stores, and whatnot. But
how many of you actually have seen the first film? Oh, what do you know? Good for you.
You're now a 100er.
Yes, I think it's sort of well known that the helicopter crash was a real helicopter crash. What happens is, again, this is an example of we didn't know how to make movies. We put the actors on a helicopter, and we found out later you don't actually do that. You put stunt people on the helicopter, and after it lands, you stage the actors on it and have them get off. We were too dumb to know that, so we put the actors, Jack Riley, who was at the time was famous for being on the Bob Newhart show, and Von Schauer, and the pilot clipped the tail rotor when he was landing, and when you clip the tail rotor on a helicopter, it starts to gyroscope.
Oh, jeez.
Because the tail rotor, which goes the opposite way, gives us the stability, and so it crashed. What can happen in that case is the rotor will flip the helicopter over because it's so strong, and people can be seriously injured or killed. But this pilot was an experienced pilot, and he cut the engine before it hit the ground, so the rotor was dead. It just broke. It didn't. And the helicopter burned into a little lump of plastic and steel, but the actors weren't seriously injured. And the helicopter cost more than the movie by far. The person that we had borrowed it from was somebody we knew. We didn't rent it; they were loaning it to us for free, which turned out to be a really expensive favor. And as I said earlier, we do have a podcast, KillerTomatoes.com, at KillerTomatoes.com, the Killer Tomatoes podcast, where I interview people who are fans of the film, are peripherally connected, were actors in the film. And if you want to listen to the podcasts, we put a new one out every few weeks, and you can listen to some really great stories from the people who are connected with the film.
Yeah, and really quickly, go ahead, Michael.
Yeah, and, if you're looking for the merch, if you go to atomic-nerd.com, we had we sold out at San Diego. We did skateboard decks.
Really cool.
Super cool, yeah. In fact, all the Teamsters were trying to buy them before the show opened. They were coming by. It was pretty awesome. So we're going to replenish some of those in November.
Great.
We have posters, and we're going to have some of these guys up in November as well.
Awesome. Atomic-nerd.com. Okay. And then attackofthekillertomatoes.com.
KillerTomatoes.com.
KillerTomatoes.com. Hey, I want to thank everybody for coming out to our panel. Thank you so much for coming. Check out all the links. This will be on the Killer Tomato podcast very soon. And go to $2 late fee. We'll have that as well. $2latefee.com and readytoretro.com as well. And territorymarks.com as well. Thank you guys so much for joining us. And
thank you.
Have a great day.
Thanks for listening to Attack of the Killer Tomatoes. Be sure to follow and subscribe whenever you listen to your podcasts. To read the blog associated with this episode, visit olismedia.com. This episode was produced in studios located in San Diego, California and Tijuana, Baja California. Creative Director Ulises Bretón. Sound Engineer Alan Glazepar. Ina Alvarez is co-producer. Serving as executive producer and co-founder is J.C. Polk. And Chad Pease is president and co-founder. Olis Media is an IVC media company.
Olis Media.